Good evening, and thank you all for joining us for our True Talk Thursday podcast, a platform that encourages a thought-provoking conversation about topics centered around education. What's so neat about this podcast is that you'll hear opinions, experiences, research, and ideas from various perspectives. But I do want to remind you all that the views and opinions expressed tonight do not necessarily reflect that of Allah's or NAVSB. Driving the conversation tonight, we do have the Executive Director of Allah's, Maria Armstrong. And so without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Francois. Yeah, I need to start out by saying that my co-host Atiba Weza, he will be missed tonight, but he wanted to send his hellos, saludos. But we'll catch him around the corner here in the coming year. There's a little bit of snowfall in his way, so we've given him a snow day today. So, but we're gonna have a great conversation. I'm so excited, Abram, to have you on True Talk Thursday. We talk outside of the Thursdays every once in a while, and somehow our conversations may start out about, hey, how you doing? But we always wind up on the same topic, and it's data. I think we're a couple of closet data nerds, maybe, I don't know. But I always enjoy our conversations. But now we're gonna bring it on this platform to share because, I don't know about you, I'm sure you have too. As the VP of Curriculum Associates, you all, are going through a lot of different kinds of supports and gathering of information. And I really think it's essential right now that as we start to, cut through all of the different types of assessments, because we know there's no lack of them right now, it's really just trying to sift through a little deeper into sometimes what I call the sound bites or the snapshot approach to data, because there's so much more that lies in the bar graph and the pie chart. So we're super excited to have you tonight. And I guess the only rule we have on there besides the disclaimer that Francois said was you got to have some fun, okay? So let's start out with, I think the first question that comes to mind whenever we talk about what's going on right now, because the learning loss is a hot topic. And this podcast tonight is really a tee up for our upcoming webinar conference, in January. We're hosting an education conclave where that is the actual theme part of the entire focus for the conference. It's language and literacy and mitigating learning loss. And so, thinking about what's happened in April, really from March on, but then the beginning of the fall, and you guys launching your data point, how well are our students performing just in this first half?
Well, Maria, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and my sincerest appreciations to you and the organization for surfacing these kinds of conversations. I think there is a space that we have to think about this nationally and allow for our local districts and states to consider what's happening at the state level, but also most importantly, think about how it's impacting kind of at the national level. And I want to say before we dig in, if we don't chat, and this is to everyone before the holidays, I just hope you have an absolutely blessed time, considering all of the amazing things and unique experiences that we've had. I hope everyone enjoys. So
I'm with you right there. Absolutely.
Well, Maria, I think what you just mentioned is absolutely spot on. For me, for you, and for many folks, we're very conscious of that remote learning is going to be something different. We have gone through so many stages of what we believed we can do to negate what could be impacting student performance. and we've listened to lots of educators on what's top of mind. And what has surfaced over and over is like, to what extent is COVID learning impacting overall, student performance? And some of the information that I'd like to share with you today originated from our continuous just research on information. And one thing that I'll note here that I think is unique is that we had an opportunity to ask students a very simple question before administering their fall diagnostic assessment. And that was, are you in a school building today? That information there has provided some insights that I think is very important, and I hope to share with all of us today, because it does have some implications for policy, for overall remote learning plans, and kind of what we're doing and how we move forward. So Dr. Armstrong, is it okay if I share my screen?
Oh, please do.
So, like I mentioned, the diagnostic assessment is a computer adaptive assessment, and it's for students in grades K through 12 for both reading and math. And the uniqueness about this assessment is that it provides 5 criterion reference or standards-based grade level placements. And those you can see in the table, or excuse me, kind of in the language on the right. And what's also unique here is, unlike norms, which I think is getting a lot of play in the national media right now, the criterion reference or standard-based approach gives us basic information on how are students doing relative to grade level knowledge and skills. Okay, so let's start off on the left-hand side. And at a national level, in reading, I want to show kind of the information on the left-hand side that shows the performance of students based on those 5 different bands for students that tested in school. So you'll see students that are mid or early on grade level, which is fantastic, is approximately 17%. The second one is students that tested blended, right? May have started in school or at home, and that environment shifted. And you see that data. And then I'll call attention to the right bar chart that shows the percentage of students that scored mid or early. You can see that it is significantly higher for students that did not test in school, right? And there's a few things here that I just want to kind of give as context. Our historical performance, and we'll go a little bit into that in more detail shortly, but our historical performance is much more aligned to what we're seeing on the left-hand side than what we're seeing on the right-hand side, okay? And in having multiple conversations with educators across the country, right, I think we all have assumptions on why this is, right? And I think for the most part, what we've heard is that, at home, there may be some help, right? And it makes sense, right? If kids are going through an assessment and they may have some challenges, there may be a helping hand that can help them through that. And when we think about a computer adaptive assessment, the important piece that we have to consider is that assessment is like an eye exam, right? You're going to get some right, you're going to get some wrong, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's spot on to what your specific assets and needs are. Let me then transition to math. And in math,
before you go on to math, Abram, so I love the way how you were putting it in context, because sometimes we catch certain catchphrases that we're very used to as educators, right? And so, for example, the CAT, it's a computer aided adaptive testing. That means that even though they're in school, they're still using a computer, right? And even though they're in school, they're using a computer and there's a helping hand of sorts, whether they're having technical issues or, I'm not real sure what this means or just that kind of stuff goes on in the helping hands of teacher versus, just so that I understand correctly, those kinds of variables even change within the environment that's outside of school. So the degree and frequency of the support could change as well, correct?
Well, in this case, Dr. Armstrong, the students would have had some sort of familiarity with being able to go on a computer, right, administering the test, and for some, and not necessarily for all, but going into in taking that test, it really is just an accurate depiction of what a student's instructional starting point is, right? Because we want to be able to use this information to drive towards action. And the insights that you can gain from that are really important. One thing that I didn't point out here that I will pause for just a second is, I mentioned the national narrative of what's being communicated, right? Everyone wants to know, like, where are we at as a nation and how have we fared in both, reading and math? And the national narrative has been reading, we're doing okay. And in math, not as well. So take into consideration the information that you're seeing here. And I think what we've missed is we're averaging these numbers and not necessarily truly understanding what these numbers mean, which really call to attention the need to dig deeper into the information, right? The other part that I'll mention and I'll share with you later is it's also really interesting who those students were that tested in school as opposed to out of school, because there are differences.
I was just going to say that, we can, on the face of it, look at the bar graph, right? But to me, the interesting part is when you start to dig into the bar graph and not just run with the sound bite or the snapshot of saying, oh, wow, so we're not really doing all that bad, really? Let's just do the simplicity of the math on that, and let's have a deeper conversation about what the numbers mean. So I appreciate that pause.
Yeah, no problem, Dr. Armstrong. So let me transition to then in math. And as I mentioned, very similar to reading, we see the same pattern where students that tested in school have different outcomes, or at least the data is different for students that did not test in school, right? And we see that large increase in those differences. The other point that I think is important when you look at these different levels and the descriptors of those levels is that we're assessing students at the beginning of the year. And some students would obviously test in the yellow because they may be entering into a new grade and have not been exposed to the content. Exactly. And through their instructional year, they'll perform to grade level expectations and meet state content standards, right? So I think that that's a really important piece. So
you're absolutely right. We've had, you get to close out our assessment series, by the way, Abram. And so we've had, I think it's 6 previous vodcasts talking around not just the academic assessing, but also on the social, on the SEL, the social emotional learning part of it as well. But one of the things that I think we forget is that we don't talk about the purpose of the assessment. And I think you hit it by saying, we launched a diagnostic. That is a different type of assessment than whether it's, an informative one that we're doing, and as a teachers do informative all the time. That's just what we do, right? Versus a summative. And what's happening at the end of the year? Was there any growth? But you have to know where you start. It's like on a map, So where's point A and where's point B, and how do we get to those 2 points? So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Armstrong, instructional time is so precious. And the last thing we want to do is waste it with assessing students if the information does not drive towards positive action in
Yep.
helping support students,
Yeah.
right? And it's not only important to know, how students are doing, but just kind of in their own academic standing, but we also want to be able to understand their growth projectiles as well and how they're doing relative to others, right? And we want to be able to be insightful about that growth, and ultimately at the teaching, kind of at the classroom level, those things are super important. But when we start, thinking about organizations and district offices and central offices, having those insights help us best position resources, time,
Absolutely.
attention, and strategies towards finding those best practices and scaling them across the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And at a national level, the one of the major concerns, because there's a laundry list of those, right? But one of them is, whether to waive yet again assessments. And so having this, because we're talking policy and resources from a federal level. And so if we don't have this conversation about the purpose of assessments and what their functionality is, then we're going to miss the boat. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to revert back to the days of, it's just a roll of the dice if you're making it out of school. Kids need support, teachers need support, administrators need support. And that's what we do at a national level.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we're all, we all have uniquenesses, and being able to understand the uniquenesses of each individual child is so important, right? And I think the insights give you kind of insights there.
So I'm interested about this slide you have. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So what we've done is looked at, so if the differences from out of school are something that we recognize and know that it requires some deeper analysis, what I wanted to present here is for students that are both in and out, and what that actually means for 2 or more grade level below. And for the reason that I had mentioned, that 1 grade level, like, give students access to content and some great teaching, like, kids will meet those expectations. So here what we're seeing in reading is what percentage of students are placing 2 or more grade levels below. And again, the comparison is in school versus out of school. A few things that I want to share with you here. The information for fall performance shows, based on where students tested, what percentage are 2 or more grade levels below. So in this example, you'll see 30% of students in school. And what we did was we grounded that in further context based on historical matches of students at that school, right? And in this case, we see a 2% increase of students performing 2 or more grade levels
below. Yeah.
Right? Conversely, let's look at that same information, but for students that tested out of school. And so you'll see historically, these schools, or students matched through these schools, were at 34%. However, that number actually decreased to 30%, right? Again, showing a very different narrative of, students testing in school as opposed to students testing out of school. The other point that I want to just highlight here, Dr. Armstrong, is note the historical information of where a student's starting point was academically in those 2 different locations, right? Where students that tested in school, 28% were 2 or more grade levels, as opposed to the students out of school at 34%. So let me also share, because the same information happens in mathematics as well. So in school, right, we see a starting point of 24%,
Mhm.
with a increase in the number of students that were 2 or more grade levels below. Conversely, for students that tested out of school, we actually see a drop in the percentage of students scoring 2 or more grade levels below, right? I don't know what the answer is here, but I'll tell you, it's very thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm.
And
You
as
got me leaning over in my chair here because it's like, man, all kinds of things are going through my head right now. And again, that's where it's like the variables, right? It's the variables in this. On the surface, there's questions, of course, but I want to know more. And so with that, because I just have a feeling we're gonna get into what those variables are. So we're gonna take a break, Abram, and this is a little bit of a cliffhanger for me, so it's gonna be a short break, but we'll be right back. And so on behalf of Alas and Nabzi, Francois, Atiba, and I want to wish you the happiest of holidays. Take a break and we'll see you next year.
Hey there, and don't forget, if you like what you hear and want to gain some more insight into what school districts are facing now, then tune in every Thursday at 7 p.m. or subscribe below. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great night.